after the Senator concludes her opening remarks, we'll start with the written question first. But before the Senator starts, I'm going to call up Nadine Nakamura to introduce her.
KKCR Hanalei,
Thank you, Alan.
KAQA Kilauea.
When I first graduated from Radford High School a while back, my plan was to go off to college and become a journalist or become a newspaper editor. And things changed along the way, and I got my degree in public affairs and urban and regional planning. So the only thing I got to edit was my annual family Christmas newsletter. And every member in my family gets a chance to write 1 or 2 paragraphs highlighting their year, and I get to edit it and put it into final form. So I wanted to read to you a section of our 2016 Nakamura family newsletter. And it's an excerpt from my daughter, Casey, who is 20 years old. And she wrote, this is last year, "This summer I was incredibly fortunate to intern in the office of one of my childhood heroes, United States Senator Mazie Hirono in Washington, D.C. The highlights of my time there included delivering snacks to the House Gun Control Sit-In, writing a memo on the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism bill, and watching the only Asian American woman in the Senate kick ass every single day." It's true. Whether Mazie is fighting for Planned Parenthood funding, or saving the Affordable Care Act, or even defending a federal judge against an illegal immigration executive order, our Senator Mazie Hirono has our backs, and we are so proud to have her in our U.S. Congress. Mazie has been and always will be a progressive public official. From her early days in the State House of Representatives to her work as Lieutenant Governor, the U.S. House of Representatives, and now in the U.S. Senate, Mazie Hirono has always been on the side of the disenfranchised. She has always been on the side of creating a level playing field. And she has always been on the side of giving everyone, not just a privileged few, an opportunity to succeed in this country. And I am so very honored to introduce to you this afternoon our Senator Mazie Hirono.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you so much, everybody. Lovely Kauai. All right. And your wonderful mayor is here, too. Come on over, Mr. Mayor. He does so much. Is he running for re-election or what? I don't even know. I work with them. I work with the council. Nadine, thank you so much. Your family and my family go back a long way because I was very good friends with Justice Ed Nakamura, and Nadine was very instrumental in having a book published about his life and all the things that he did. So she comes from really good stock, but you already know that. I'm so glad she's in the legislature. And of course, you got your big guy right here. So mahalo. Mahalo. Before I start, do you want to say like 2 sentences?
4 sentences.
Okay, 4 sentences.
Mazie Hirono rocks, okay? No, really, I want to just say that we have a good working relationship. We can always go to Mazie and her awesome team. She surrounds herself with great people, with great hearts and great souls, and all caring for the people. So we're very happy to have you, Mazie, with us, and look forward to some healthy dialogue. But very supportive. Mazie Hirono, aloha.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A couple of things that I just want to mention. We announced that there's a— grant to KDB for the Media Tech Center. Is that what? Yeah. So this is something that Maddie had been working on for a while, and I'm really glad that we were able to get this funding. And it is all about stimulating economic activity and things like film industry, all of that. So I'm glad for that. And then I know how much you folks want the Lihue Post Office to stay there, right? Post offices are very important community places. And I know whenever there is any talk about shutting down a post office, I hear from the people who go there, who rely upon, the services there. And so I think that the U.S. Postal Service did not give enough attention to hear the voices of the community. So they say that they're going to take a little pause to give all of you more of a chance to say why this is so important. And I think sometimes federal agencies, and I work very closely with them, and I work very closely with their representatives in Hawaii, because I think it's important for us to work with the local, the Fish and Wildlife people, and the local EPA, and all of those folks, because they're the ones who are here in the community, and if we can have them understand our views, I think that's all the better. But anyway, sometimes when it's folks on the mainland who think that, well, what's the problem? Why don't you just drive 2 miles to another postal facility? Hey, 2 miles to us is far. Come on. But it's the Lihue Post Office is a lovely building, and it's been part of your community for a long time. So those are some of the things that I pay particular attention to, because it means a lot to the community. I'm glad to be here. Thank you all for taking Saturday, on a beautiful Saturday, to talk story with me. And I think I'd like to just get right to the questions. She's been standing there patiently for a while since I got here. So are we going to go to the mic first, Alan? Go ahead.
Aloha, Senator. Thank you so much for coming. I'm pretty sure I saw you live on Facebook this morning on another island.
I was on Oahu just a little while ago doing a town hall meeting on Oahu.
Yeah, you're busy.
Yes.
My question is about education. The University of Hawaii and Kauai Community College are minority-serving institutions. Mm-hmm. KCC is over 74% minority. Okay, and we rely on Title III, mm-hmm. ANNH, and AAPI. That stands for Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian, mm-hmm. Asian American, and Pacific Islander funding, which has been congressionally set aside. We fear that this is in jeopardy. And it has funded for us at KCC things like a pre-engineering program, early college classes in the high schools, so they get college credit for math in high school now. It's getting us a voyaging canoe so we can teach voyaging, and a language lab for Hawaiian studies, many things like that we cannot afford to get out of the budget we get from the state. So my question is, how can we protect Title III educational funds for minorities, including Native Alaskans and Native Hawaiians? And can we join forces with the Alaska delegation?
Oh, great question. Thank you very much. In fact, when I was in the U.S. House of Representatives, I served on the education. At that time, it was called Education and Labor. And when the Republicans gained control of the House in 2010, they took out the word labor, which gives you an idea of some of their orientation, and they changed it to education and workforce. But I spent 6 years on that committee, and one of the partners that I had to make sure that we protected Aboriginal and original people's programs, whether it be in housing, education, or healthcare, was Don Young of Alaska. And he and I teamed up to save Native Hawaiian and Alaska Natives and American Indian education money and authorization. So we do work closely together. But a lot of these funded programs are going to come under attack with the Trump administration. We have an education secretary, and Betsy DeVos, who does not believe in public schools, and she's probably going to put out a proposal that will basically voucherize our public schools. That is not the way to go. But here she was. She's one of the first people that President Trump nominated to be a secretary, for which she was not suited. And I heard from thousands Thousands of people from Hawaii, not just on her, but on Scott Pruitt, EPA, spend most of his time suing EPA, our Attorney General. You go down the list, but I'm very grateful that the people of Hawaii have contacted me by the thousands, more than ever during a similar period of time. So keep doing it, because these are untoward times. So I will do everything I can to protect the resources for the minority serving institutions, which, by the way, we expanded when Ruben Inahosa of the House was chairing higher education. Right. He and I worked really closely together to do that.
And I'm sorry, I forgot. We're supposed to identify ourselves. Oh. My name's Lynn McNutt, and I'm from Wailua.
Thank
Mahalo,
you very much,
Senator.
Lynn. Oh, go ahead. Come on up.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Aloha, Senator Hirono, and welcome back to Kauai. Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. You and other members of the Hawaii Congressional Delegation all pride yourselves on being champions for human rights and protecting the environment, and I appreciate your efforts. I'd like to ask you where you stand on your continued support for the expanding U.S. militarization of East Asia. Even as the United States continues to maintain 82,500 U.S. troops in South Korea, Okinawa, and Japan, we're expanding our own military footprint in what will be America's largest military base at Army Garrison Camp Humphreys in South Korea, while at the same time we force the construction of a new U.S. military base, Marine base, at Henoko in Okinawa, despite years of 24/7 protests and overwhelming local opposition. I'd like to also ask your thoughts on the United States' own responsibility when it comes to our own close allies who suffer human rights violations and environmental destruction, because we're forcing the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system against the wishes of the Korean people, and pushing Japan to bulldoze and cut down tropical forests for the U.S. Marine helipads, while also dumping 2 million cubic meters of sand, dirt, rocks, and so forth on the coral reefs and sea grass beds of Oura Bay in Henoko, Okinawa. Please tell me if you think that the forced construction of new U.S. military bases, in addition to the more than 150 bases and facilities already in South Korea, Okinawa, and Japan, is consistent with U.S. stated values of protecting human rights and the environment. And then, as a quick follow-up, the U.S. maintains about 587 military bases and installations in 40 countries around the world. My question is, how many foreign military bases or foreign troops do you think Americans would accept on U.S. soil?
Thank you. By the way, what is your name, sir?
My name is John Letman. Nice to see you.
John, thank you. As you probably know, I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And national security issues loom large with the unrest in the Middle East, with what is happening with North Korea and their unrelenting desire to become a nuclear power, and the threats that is posed thereby, China's expansion in the South China Seas and some of the other aggressive or provocative acts that they're taking, unrest in Africa. So these are times where we are very much challenged in terms of our own national security. However, we can't go it alone, and this is why other countries, especially in the Asia-Pacific area, they have come forward. You know, it's not as though we are forcing bases in these places. We are generally asked to come. One hopes that we are entering into a mutually beneficial agreement. And so I have visited, Okinawa, and we would like to move those troops out of Futema. And it is the Japanese government that picked Henoko as the place to go. And whether or not that is actually going to happen, I think everyone agrees that we should move the Marines out of Futema, because that is in the middle of Okinawa, and it's a dangerous kind of situation. As for the THAAD in South Korea, that is something that the South Korean government and the people there, especially with the threat from North Korea and the saber rattling and everything else, that is another thing that it has been mutually you may disagree with me, but I serve on the committee, and I hope that I make decisions based on not warmongering or a desire to go to war anywhere, because military action is the last thing that we want to do. What we need to shore up is our ability to diplomatically resolve all of these conflicts and instability. And that's why when you have a President Trump who wants to cut the State Department by 30%, that is not the direction we need to go. We have a president who seems quite wedded to military might as a way to get our points across, and I do not agree with that. So there are a number of questions that I know you asked. I every day practically we are given information about the threats that are faced, not just by our country, but our allies. And therefore, some tough decisions are made. And I take it that you don't agree with it, but I do my very best based on my desire to support diplomatic resolution of conflicts, not sending boots on the ground. On that, I am on your page. Thank you.
And then the follow-up, the 587 bases.
I'm sorry?
The follow-up about how many foreign troops you think Americans would support on our country?
I think that I would not think that we would want to have foreign troops in our countries unless we thought that they were there to protect us. And basically, that is the rationale for us being in these other countries, that they believe we are there to work with them, to protect them. If they can do more themselves, which is the direction that Japan is going, I think that that's what we should do. But again, military power, military might, military use is not the first action that we should be taking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator, this is from Lawrence from Kauai. Thank you for allowing a small town boy to I can't actually read this part. Just want to thank you for giving my son, soon to graduate with political science degree, an internship with your Washington, D.C. office. My son is Lawson Fujita Fernandez. So.
Is there a question?
No, so he just wants to thank you.
Thank you. You all are very gracious, and thank you for the lei, by the way. It's always very welcoming for me to come to Kauai and join all of you. Question?
Senator Hirono, thank you for coming to Kauai. We, the fishermen of Kauai, dressed in white,
Yes.
welcome you to Kauai, and
Thank
would
you.
like to thank you for your past support. I do have a question, though, and the question is, right now, the state of Hawaii, there's projects going on that under NOAA, which is the federal government, that are trying to do projects within their jurisdiction. In other words, within state waters. Is there any comment about that? What you think, do you think that maybe the local residents of Hawaii should pursue this either with the federal government or the state?
Anytime that the federal government, whether it's Fish and Wildlife or NOAA, if they're contemplating doing something that's going to impact other users, like the fishermen, then what I do is I create opportunities for the federal government to hear what the concerns are, so that we can attempt to be as respectful and accommodating as possible. And so I work very closely with the local representatives of the federal agencies, because I think, as I mentioned, I think it's important to establish those kinds of relationships, because those people live in this community too, these communities too. And I think that lends to a better understanding and to listen to our voices better, and one hopes that they can become our advocates as opposed to adversaries in terms of the concerns that you folks have. I know we have had these issues over the years, and I've had the privilege and the pleasure of meeting with the fishermen on a number of occasions, and I will keep on doing that.
I thank you, and so I guess we in white will probably come knocking on your door more often.
Yes.
Thank you.
I hear your voice is loud and clear.
And thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Hello, Senator. Welcome to Kauai. I'm going to come and
Thank
give
you.
you this when I'm done. Thank you so much for... Well, I'll do it now.
He's getting to it.
I am State Representative James Konani Tokioka, District 15, which you're in, is the district that I represent. Thank you for the question. Senator, thank you for all you do. I just want to ask you a simple question, and I want people to know about this program because it really impacts a lot of people on Kauai. So the first question is, Hawaii on the Hill, can you please explain to everybody when it is? And I think it's important because the mayor and our Senate President are co-chairs of this event at the Hill. Many people that are in this room today, Stephanie Iona in the back, Randy Francisco,
Kauai
who is
cookies.
here. Yeah.
Right there.
So, but I don't think enough people know how important it is to Kauai, Senator, and all the work that you put in, and all the senators that come and the representatives that come to see at the exchange of opportunities on Kauai and the support at the congressional level that you created yourself, and Kauai, I believe, was the biggest participant of this event. I see Captain Vinnie Johnson there. PMRF was there last year. So can you please tell us when it is and just a little bit about it, Senator?
Thank you. We're going on year 4 of featuring Hawaii businesses and Hawaii entities such as PMRF to come to Washington, D.C. to show everyone in Washington, D.C. that Hawaii is so much more than tourism and military, that we have a lot of entrepreneurs, we have a lot of hardworking people. In fact, one of the small businesses, if you can call it that, from Hawaii, Garrett Marillo of Maui Brewing, became the National Small Business Person of the Year. Small businesses. So we are on the map in so many different ways, but it is to feature Hawaii products, Hawaii people. And we never did this in Washington, D.C. before because can you imagine transporting everybody from Hawaii to D.C.? It's a lot of coordinated effort. And when our office thought, well, you know, we've never had Hawaii on the Hill. I used to go to Connecticut on the Hill, Vermont on the Hill, New York on the Hill. And we thought, why don't we try it? And I'm really glad that the Chamber of Commerce, under the leadership of Sherry McNamara, she was the first woman to head up the Hawaii Chamber of Commerce, said, let's take a risk and let's go and do it. And Hawaii on the Hill is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, featured state on the Hill, and people line up. We have to give tickets. A lot of senators come because I work with my colleagues in the Senate as well as my friends in the House, and they all show up. And sometimes, it's really hard to get more than a couple of senators to show up to anything, but they come to ours because they're very supportive of what we're doing. And we also have a portion of the program where we have people from outside, or sometimes it's people from the administration who come and interact with the small businesses that participate on the Hill, so that there can be this exchange and communication, because they need to hear from our businesses, and then relationships can develop that can carry over time. So it's been very successful, and Kauai has been the most participating island of any of the islands, thanks to the leadership of your mayor and also your Senate President. And you too, Jimmy. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to expound a little bit. So, it's June. When is it? June 15th? I'm looking for my staff here. June 14th, Hawaii on the Hill. If any of you are going to be in Washington, D.C. during that period, it's quite the event. We hold it probably, is it going to be in the Kennedy Caucus Room again? A very historic room. That's where the Watergate hearings were held. It's very historic. And if any of you are going to be in D.C., let us know so that we can invite you to join us.
So, Senator, I have a question here from Marilyn from Kalaheo. As a mental health counselor, I have grave concerns about the mental health of our president. Can Congress do anything to assure Americans that this president is in sound mental health?
You can see these are not questions that we're picking at random. Sure. How can you not have some concerns about a president who, on day one, might say that we should end NAFTA, and the very next day he's saying, hooray for NAFTA, or who keeps changing his mind? Sure, we have concerns. And this is why I think that he needs to have some people around him who bring the kind of experience and what I would call adult maturity to the table. But he doesn't have that many people like that. I've not been able to support that many of his cabinet nominees, starting with people like Betsy DeVos as Education Secretary, who doesn't believe in public schools, or Scott Pruitt, who has been an EPA administrator who spent most of his time suing the EPA. This is not an administration that is friendly to environmental issues, I can tell you that. And all the way to the Supreme Court. However, there are two, ways, and a lot of people think that impeachment is an avenue, but did you folks see the picture of all the U.S. House Republicans who happily went to the White House Rose Garden, where they were cheering themselves for passing a health care law that is going to be totally damaging to people who have pre-existing conditions, because you're going to get to pay a heck of a lot more, to seniors who are going to get to pay a heck of a lot more, to Medicare, you name it, Medicaid, and yet they were there. Now these are the people who are going to have to vote on impeachment. So what do you think the chances are? Meanwhile, we're not going to be holding our breath. So what we're going to be doing is fighting the battles that need to be fought, raising our voices. I have heard from more people from Hawaii for all of these nominees than ever, and it makes a difference. It keeps me going. Thank you very much. It keeps me going when I'm out there. So we need to stay engaged. Everyone who comes to see me from Hawaii to ask for funding for the National Institute of Health or for, you name it, library studies, I say, please keep doing what you're doing, but you just have to please do more of it. And then to partner with groups that you may not have partnered with before, because we're all of these kinds of programs are under attack, and we need to hold hands and get our voices out there. After all, who knew that scientists would march? So I have hope. Thank you.
Aloha, Senator. Whoops. My name is Taryn Davis. I'm with the ALS Association, so I work with people who have ALS throughout Hawaii. Recently, it's come to my attention that some of our veterans who are twice as likely to get ALS are exported to the mainland when they have trachs and ventilators, because the VA doesn't have a contract here in Hawaii for any facilities that have trachs and vents. So your office has been so wonderful. So this is a thank you, not a question. Thank you so much for listening to this issue. And your office is working with us right now on getting the VA to get a contract so our local veterans can stay where their families and their loved ones and their support systems are. So thank you so much. And please continue the fierceness and the strength and courage you have in DC. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your advocacy. I serve on the Veterans Committee, and that's one of the areas that I hope that we can work on a bipartisan way to help the veterans, not just in Hawaii, but all across the country. But one of the bills that I'm pursuing is with Joni Ernst of Iowa, and that is to promote or to create a telemedicine capability so that people in rural areas such as Joni Ernst, Iowa, and neighbor islands, that our veterans can access healthcare services without leaving the island, and to provide and to get the kind of adequate, we want to make sure that these are the kind of services that they deserve. So there's some new things that are coming down the pike, and I work very closely with Republicans on a number of these. So thank you.
How's it, Mazie?
How's it?
Thanks for coming to Kauai, and welcome to my neighborhood, Puhi. I know you're a supporter of working people.
Yes.
And as a working man, I'm coming up to ask you the question. I get two questions to ask you. The first one is, there's a movement right now within Congress which was introduced by Bernie Sanders and Keith Ellison and Chuck Schumer to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour nationally. What is your stand on that? And if you support that, would you encourage the state legislature of Hawaii to support this as well?
I think I already signed on to that bill, or I will be signing on to it, because we need to have people with have a living wage. And so $15 an hour. And you know, these are people that I work with very closely, Chuck and Bernie, and probably Elizabeth is probably on that too. So, yes, Hawaii's minimum wage just went up, right, this year. I think that Hawaii was moving in the right direction and raising the minimum wage here, and we can all move toward $15. And there are other things that we can do to support our working families and our people, including, let's not get screwed over health care.
Okay. Thank you, Mazie. The other question I get is, what is your stand on so-called national right-to-work legislation that the anti-unionist Republicans are pushing in Washington? Where it would really eliminate the power of workers to organize and bargain for decent wages and conditions. I'd like to get your stand on that.
I am definitely against right-to-work legislation. But here's the concern. You ever heard of a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court called Friedrichs? Okay, that's a case that the public teachers in California were defending their right to collect fees, the way the unions have been collecting fees to represent everyone. And this is not the fees for political action, but fees just to provide the services that every member, in fact, even non-members of the unions, that they were obligated to provide. So this is a case that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. There's absolutely no question in my mind that had Anthony Scalia been alive, it would have been a 5-4 decision, and that would have been, by a Supreme Court decision, basically national right-to-work laws, because this is a decision that would disallow unions to collect fees in this way. So now with Neil Gorsuch, these cases are going to make their way up to the Supreme Court, and I'm pretty sure that he will vote the way Scalia did, and that's why we have to remain organized. And I've been fighting for Davis-Bacon all the way through, and all of those laws, because this is an administration that is not friendly to unions. And when you're not friendly to unions, that means you're not supportive of working people or really the middle-class families. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mazie. Mahalo.
Senator, this is from Lisa from Kapaa. She asks, the health care bill sent up by the House seems to be a bad deal for vulnerable people and a good deal for the 1%. What is your stance on how we can get to a single-payer system?
I've gotten a lot of questions about single-payer system and support for it, which is a good thing, because that means that people don't support what the Republicans are doing, which is really basically going backward on health care. We're not even moving toward any kind of a single-payer system at all. So I will fight this bill, which was bad to begin with in the U.S. House. They couldn't even get enough votes to support it the first time. They've made it worse because now states can opt out of requiring some minimal coverages and people with pre-existing conditions, while supposedly insurance companies will need to cover you, they can charge you a lot of money. So all around, this is very bad news, and to see the image of all these Republicans running to the Rose Garden, happily cheering themselves on when most of them hadn't even read the bill, and we don't even know what the cost will be. I think that was really a sad comment, and the rest of us have to fight this kind of a move in the wrong direction every step of the way. Now, you know that there are entrenched interests in our insurance industry. So moving toward a single-payer system, we can do it step by step, but I think one of the first things for me is there's a clear and present danger. We have to defeat Trump care, and I think that Mitch McConnell has already constituted a Senate Republican group with not a single woman in it, by the way, to determine what health care would look like if they had their way, and it is not a way that we can support. So clear and present danger, fight all these battles, and then I'd like to see a public option in there at least as a way to move us toward the kind of healthcare system that provides healthcare for all of us.
Thank you, Senator Hirono, and thank you for your service and commitment. My name is Julie Hayward. I'm a member of the Kauai Indivisible here on the island. In my mind, these are not normal times, and I question the legitimacy of this administration. Every day, every week is more outrageous and alarming. The issue of Russian interference and collusion remains unanswered, and at least 6 people, I think, in the administration have at least obvious ties or identified ties to Russia in one way or another. My question is, what can happen to address this? Obviously, an independent investigation needs to occur, but what will it take, and what can you do for this to happen? Because everything that's coming out of this administration, I don't believe is legitimate.
Well, this is an administration that deals in alternative facts. And any other information that doesn't comport with their view of the world is called fake news. So it's very dangerous. The FBI, we had before the Judiciary Committee on which I sit, we had FBI Director Comey, and he acknowledged that there has been an ongoing investigation of Russian efforts to interfere with our elections, as well as Trump team ties to whatever the Russians were doing. So there is an ongoing investigation by the FBI. There are a number of both House and Senate committees, although I would say the House Intelligence Committee with Nunes has been compromised. But on the Senate side, the Senate Intelligence Committee has subpoena powers, which I hope the chair will utilize to do their part in getting to the bottom of what Russia and the Trump team have been doing. And then the Judiciary Committee has undertaken also. We have subpoena powers, and when I go back tomorrow on Monday, we will have Sally Yates and Jim Clapper testifying under oath. But I agree with you. I'm one of the people that has called for an independent investigation. And what happens there is when I questioned FBI Director Comey, I said, well, one of the things that I would like to see happen is the Department of Justice is the entity that can appoint a special prosecutor. And the person who will make that determination would be the Deputy Attorney General, because Attorney General Sessions has recused himself. So when we had the deputy before our committee, I asked him, when there is a showing that an investigation is warranted, will you do that? Will you, even if the president doesn't want you to? And he said yes. And so the FBI Director Comey said, if that happens, which he says has happened before, he will work very closely with the special investigation. And the FBI investigation will be hand in hand, because the FBI does come under the Department of Justice, but it does enjoy a level of autonomy, I would say. So we need to get to the bottom of this, because it is insanity to think that another country is interfering with our elections, and in a way that was very aggressive. And yes, we know they're doing it in Europe, but I think the more light is shown upon what Russia is doing, maybe it'll have a salutary effect on their actions. But we also have to put in place things like sanctions, economic sanctions that need to stay in place against Russia. Thank you.
I'm afraid my twin sister asked something just earlier, but I asked this gentleman if it was okay for me to go.
All right.
I urge everyone to look at the list of pre-existing conditions in this bill. And being female seems to be one of the pre-existing conditions. But there's everything under the sun. I really urge you strongly to look at that list. And I'm going to make an admission in public here. I'm turning 70 this year. And I still have to work to pay my rent and to have adequate health benefits. And I lost most of my investment money with AIG. And I had no choice in who was to be my investment, because it was the company that chose. AIG took 18 months to pay me back, and in that time they voided my account to the point that I had 25% of what I put in. They got a bailout and went on a holiday, and here I am working. Do I have to work till I die? You know, with cuts in Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare, and handing it to the states without giving them adequate money to do anything is just BS, actually. You know, that's not any kind of health care plan. And I'm looking around this room, there's a lot of white hair in this room, and you guys really, we baby boomers really need to pay attention. And it looks like AARP is doing some really good work in this area. So, you know, I'm not really sure, how do we protect our elders when it seems that nobody cares in this administration?
Have you been watching the news on the town hall meetings that some of our members of Congress are having now? Yeah. That is one of the ways. It's giving them pause. And Republican senators are saying, people like Lindsey Graham, people like Susan Collins, they're not ready to go down in flames over this health care bill that came over from the House. So these town hall meetings where, there was a time when I was on the House Education Committee, which was one of the three major committees that put together the Affordable Care Act. And I remember those times, and we had town hall meetings, and there was a lot of very angry people who showed up. And I had colleagues who even had things like coffins put in their yards. Jeez. And people lost their seats because they're racist because we voted for the Affordable Care Act. So now that people have experienced the Affordable Care Act, have experienced being on their parents' policies until they're age 26, experienced being covered and not paying more because you're a woman and pre-existing conditions, people know what the true impact is, and that's why they're showing up in droves. And that needs to be kept up because it gives people pause. See, I think that there have got to be consequences to these kinds of actions. And from where I sit, frankly, up to now, the Republicans who brought us the government shutdown that cost people hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, in the private sector, affected our economy. They got this. They took over the House after that. And when they said that on the Senate side, well, hey, we're not even going to fill the Supreme Court vacancy for a year. Judge Garland, forget it. They took over the Senate. And now they have the presidency. There have got to be consequences, and the only people who can deliver the consequences are us.
Voters.
So please remain mobilized. Thank you.
I just want to... this morning on Facebook, there was a fabulous meme that you have to look at. Somebody photoshopped the face of the representative over the shoulder of Donald Trump onto every one of the people behind. And when you first look at it, you won't notice. That's the scary part. They're all white men.
You notice that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
So Kathy from Kalaheo asks the following question. I have been following the lawsuit put forth against DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz by our fellow Democrats. This is an opportunity to address our broken primary system. With super-delegates acting as gatekeepers instead of representing the people's choice, we are experiencing a lack of democracy within our party. What are your feelings on this?
Well, as a super-delegate myself, I think that this election, where Hillary actually won by over 3 million of the popular votes, I think it's time for us to get rid of the Electoral College. So that would go a long way. So that's one thing that I think could help a lot. And of course, for those of us who have the privilege of serving, I've been in elected office for a number of years, and in fact, I go to these gatherings where a lot of people there were not even born the first year I ran for office, which was 1980. So the battles continue, and many of you know why I do what I do, and it's because I have an immigrant background. I know what it feels like to be powerless and to not have my voice heard, to rely upon our public school system to provide me opportunities for education I never would have had. And I say to my staff on a regular basis, people in our country get screwed every single second, minute, and hour of the day. And if by our efforts we can decrease that number, we will be making a difference. We will be doing our jobs. That's what keeps me going. Apart from what I see is this mobilization all across the country, starting with the Women's March that started by a retired attorney on Maui named Teresa Shook. So there are battles to fight, as we all know, and this is the time for us to step up and do it, because the alternative is not what I would want to contemplate, and I have a lot more work that I'd like to do with all of you, and this is the time for us to galvanize and get off our collective accolades.
Hello, Senator. My name's John Zwiebel. And you might feel like you've already answered this question, but I feel like I have to ask it again. But first, I want to tell people that under the AHCA that just was passed by the Republicans, rape is considered a pre-existing condition. Thank you very much, Michael. Also, if you're on employer-sponsored health care, that has a possibility of being changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. But getting back to my original question, I want to talk about the military-industrial complex and the fact that people here on Kauai are rather scared because of the fact that we're being told that even though Hawaii is 3,500 miles away from Korea, and North Korea's range of their two missiles is only 2,500 miles, that we are still under threat from North Korea, and therefore we have to deploy an $1 billion THAAD system, anti-ballistic missile system, which only has a 100-mile bubble, so we'd have to have one for every island, to protect ourselves. My question is, Trump is doing this to pressure North Korea into not pursuing his nuclear weapon systems or his ballistic missile system. We've been pressuring North Korea ever since 1950 when Douglas MacArthur suggested that we even nuke North Korea. So I believe North Korea has a very excellent reason for wanting to pursue that system in their own self-defense, even though I think Kim Jong-un is not exactly the most stable character. At least he's good friends with Donald Trump, or that's what Trump said just the other day.
Scary.
So my question basically boils down to, what are you doing to convince people or to tell people what the truth is about THAAD and whether or not that ABM system is actually needed here on Kauai, and also the fact that even though it's being deployed in Korea, Korea is more under threat with the thousands of artillery tubes that are surrounding Seoul, which could wipe it out almost as fast as any nuclear weapon could. And how can we make the change from guns to butter and spend money on making America great for Americans instead of making it great for the 1% who own everything, control everything, and push the rest of us around?
Yes. Thank you. I'm with you about the richest people in our country who keep getting more of the goodies, and in fact, that's also part of Trump Care, that the richest taxpayers will get a tax break of about $800 billion, all on the backs of everybody else. So regarding our vulnerability to North Korea's ambitions, we did have Admiral Harris, who is a Pacific commander, testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee just a week and a half or so ago. And of course I asked him, is Hawaii safe? And the reality is he said yes, because I mean we're not going to put a THAAD here. We're not there yet. We're not there. He said, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're also not going to operationalize PMRF either. We're going to put in some radar capacity. You're right. If North Korea were to respond to any provocation from us, the testimony from a number of sources is that they will attack South Korea, and Japan first, and that will certainly draw us into the fray. So we have to do everything we can not to get into any kind of a military confrontation. with these countries. And so we need a president who is actually going to pay attention to the need to shore up our diplomatic capability. And that does not happen when he intends to cut the State Department by 30%. So General Mattis, who is one of the adults in the room, he is our Department of Secretary of Defense, has said, if you're going to cut our diplomatic ability and USAID and all of those other what's sometimes been described as soft power efforts, then I'm going to need more guns. And that is very true. So I am going to do everything I can, along with other people like Elizabeth Warren, who now sits on the Armed Services Committee also, to move us toward non-military resolution of conflicts. But this requires us to partner with our allies in order to do this. We can't do it alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. One last thing. I'm a Democrat. I'm not a corporatist. I will not vote for a corporatist. Thank you.
Senator Hirono, Michael Kervorst, a tree farmer in Kauai, and I think you know the tree farm. Just for everybody's sake, I also, marrying this statement onto the lady from Kalaheo, who is a mental health counselor. Not everybody knows that. I just got a master's in clinical mental health counseling in December. But there is a lot of activity within the psychological and the counseling association. So 3,500 members of either the American Psychological or the American Counseling Association have publicly signed a statement that the mental health of our president is worthy of very serious and direct consideration. And that is because despite the code of ethics in both organizations that say you need to have personal contact with anybody to diagnose it, they believe that the duty to warn, especially if somebody's got his finger on the nuclear button, overtakes the other duties. So there are at least those two national organizations are seriously debating and working to support a public stance on that. My questions go to, I'm going to mention four, and I just want to log the questions. And they're all how-tos. Everything is a how-to question. How to protect the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, which is under attack, as is Dodd-Frank. How to protect and project, you started to address this. How do we get from projecting war and militarization to projecting peace abroad? I think we all remember the days of Kennedy, the Peace Corps, and how that really helped our country around the globe, in all parts of the globe. But right now the narrative is, unfortunately, militarization, violence, we're first, everybody else is second. And we need to shape that narrative. What can we do together to change that? Thirdly, how do we get to impeachment? You addressed that, and I was so happy to hear your direct question in the Senate to the Deputy Attorney General who would be in charge of that operation. What can we do to support you in pursuing that more actively? We think that's extremely important. And then on the question of Democratic Party issues, there's donor fatigue. There is, in addition to the standard organizations, the Senate Campaign Finance, the House or the Congressional Campaign Committee, the Governor's Committee, the DLC, the Democratic Legislative Committee, which supports, but they are opposed by ALEC, the American Legislative Executive Council, which is pushing the primacy of state regulation and forbidding the localities on sanctuary issues, on GMO labeling, etc. Is there any way we can get the party together on the financing and the contributions? Everybody gets tired. I get 30 to 50 a week supplications, give us money. But it seems like these organizations aren't talking to each other. So they see the last time you donated to us was a year ago. And in fact, donor fatigue is a serious issue right now. So I think unless that's coupled with campaign finance reform way up, it's that donor fatigue is just going to continue, and it's going to hurt us. It really is going to hurt us. And then lastly, on the reform of the Democratic Party, I think we need it at all levels, at local, state, and national levels. But that, again, is going to involve all of us going to work on it. So my question is, in response to any of those, the how-to. It's not the whether. We know where your heart is, and we applaud you for that. But any how-tos we're grateful for, and we want to support you.
Thank you, Michael.
KKCR Honolulu.
I don't know if I can remember all of the questions, but generally we want to have a government that really is responsive to the people and not the corporate interests and the 1% of the richest people in our country. So if I can remember, let's see, impeachment, that is the House that has to begin those proceedings, and the likelihood of that, not so great because, they're all happy with what they just did with health care, but that doesn't mean the rest of us just sit around, hoping against hope. That means we need to organize, so you have scientists who are marching, you have people who are contacting all of us on a daily basis. I hear from thousands of people from Hawaii with their views. I tell you, social media is a very powerful thing, and we need to raise our voices, fight the fights. Regarding campaign spending reform, so here's the thing, that is yet another reason that I was such a vocal opponent of Neil Gorsuch. Because here's a guy who I think is going to push campaign finance to the back of the list of things that will protect us. So he met Donald Trump's litmus test. Donald Trump wanted somebody who would overturn Roe v. Wade, who would support gun rights to the max, who would start to blur the religious rights of corporations. Religious rights, okay, versus individuals. So, here's a person who in the Supreme Court is going to make some decisions that will impact us in a lot of those areas that you're raising. As far as the need to raise money, donor fatigue is there, but guess what? There is no donor fatigue on the other side. The Koch brothers, all these people, they are busy pouring more money into the coffers of, the so-called independent organizations that will fight Democrats and progressive legislators up and down the line. So while we may have donor fatigue, they do not. So I put that in context. We do share information with DSCC and others. But you know what? As I mentioned to another group who asked a similar question, I think politics in many ways is really local. So I really don't want a national organization to say, here's your message and all that. I think it's really important for those of us who represent very unique states like Hawaii. Yes, we have some common interests, such as protecting seniors and Medicare, Social Security, all that. But I think that I want to be very responsive to the voices of the people here, even as I work on issues that have national ramifications. So I would like nothing better than to overturn Citizens United. That will require basically a constitutional amendment. That will require a constitutional amendment. I have signed on to such a bill. And this is one of those issues that I think will not happen unless the people of our country wake up and say, we want this. See, the Donald Trumps of the world, the Koch brothers of the world, hope that these kinds of issues are not sustainable to the communities and to the public. But if we don't show them that we care, and also let's see his tax returns, even as he moves toward... Because I think we might see a conflict there. If you see his tax returns and then he's proposing tax breaks to the richest people, and let's see how much money he's going to make, I think that's very relevant. It's not idle curiosity. So there is a bill to require all presidential candidates to disclose their tax returns, and I think that's a good bill, and I'm probably going to sign on to it if I haven't already signed on to it. So there are a number of things that we can do. But you know what's the most important thing? I think that the mobilization that has occurred in our country has got to stay going. I have a group of people that comes to my office in Hawaii, on Oahu, every Tuesday. It's the Tuesday group, right? And I interact with them. We provide information. But the people who are not on our page, who don't want the equal opportunity, justice, civil rights, they want us to all forget it. They want us all to go back to what we were doing. And then they will take over the Senate, because Mitch McConnell's goal in life is to defeat 8 Democratic senators so that he will have a majority of 60, and then there goes our ability to hold back the hundreds and hundreds of bad legislation that comes out of the House every single session. So that is my plea, my call to action to all of you. Please keep doing what you're doing, and you just have to do even more of it, because these are untoward times, these are unpredictable times, these are alternative fact times. And we have to fight back.
Senator Raymond asks, do you support the Raise the Wage Act for a $15 minimum wage? And will you encourage the state legislature to support it?
Yes, because people need to have a living wage. And so I think that we need to, I am supportive. And I think that we have to work with the small businesses and others who will protest. And you got the Chamber of Commerce, you got all these entities that will be very fearful of moving in that direction, but some other jurisdictions are already doing it. In fact, in this age of Trump, I think a lot of the legislation that will be what we would call progressive will happen in those states that are led by Democratic governors, progressive governors, or regional efforts along those lines. And we will continue. Believe me, I will be doing my very, very best in Congress to raise my voice and raise your voices. But we got to do it on a lot of different fronts. People have to run for office, for local office, because when we didn't pay as much attention as we should have to who was getting elected to the state legislatures and the governorships, that's what brought us reapportionment of the sort that led to the taking over of the U.S. House. Fortunately, they can't reapportion the Senate yet. Yes.
Hi, Mazie.
Hi.
I'm Lee Kramer,
Hi.
public school substitute teacher,
Yes.
and a believer in public education.
Can you get closer to
Get
the
a
mic?
little closer to the mic?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And I want to remind you, we last met at Kauai Elementary School cafeteria, and a local fellow in the back of the audience had a couple of comments, and one was single payer hospitalization and medical coverage. He called it Medicare for all, which I thought, and I hope that you're kind of plumping for that, because I think that's a tremendous idea, for the nation. He called that real national security. And the second thing is, you talked about small people getting screwed over every day, and good old Kauai passed an ordinance against pesticides, against the big corporate interests who are poisoning the Aina. And it's infuriating, because one is a Swiss company and the other, Monsanto company, has just sold out to a Chinese firm, and that is who is coming here to our land and using us as guinea pigs with their pesticides, which they won't reveal what they are. Absolutely won't reveal what the pesticides are. And we passed it. The state squashed it. And Mazie, there's got to be something that can be done for the people of Hawaii who are facing these huge corporate interests in poisoning our land and perhaps poisoning us.
Lee, I know you're probably aware that there were a number of bills at the state legislature for pesticide disclosure and monitoring and all of that. And so the the legal challenges resulted in the court saying that it is the states, not the counties, that can pass this kind of legislation. So that's where the advocacy needs to continue at the state legislative level, because that's where you can, I think, actually make a change.
Michael, just to continue the last speaker's question, my understanding is that the American Legislative Exchange Council, which has as among its membership the corporations behind, that includes Monsanto and so on, that they're the ones who have already been passing through the various states model legislation to assert the preemption is the word they're using for that the states have. And so if we're going to stop that, we're late in Hawaii. It's already been passed by our legislature, so we've got to get engaged with our state legislature on overturning that preemption clause. But it's a national effort by the corporations and the members of the American Legislative Exchange Council, and that was part of my how-to questions. How can our Democratic Legislative Council, which supports Democratic candidates at the state level, how can we possibly successfully combat organizations like ALEC that have budgets that are huge and often secret? The how-to part is what I'm stumbling over.
I would say, everything I know about ALEC is that they are a very conservative organization. And if you know that they're the ones behind a particular kind of legislation that they want to get enacted in every state in the country, that should mobilize us, because what they don't have is a grassroots support. That is one thing that they don't have. So that's what you all have.
Senator Jed asks, often I can tell immediately when a person with narcissism has lost contact with reality. Others are more composed and competent. Do you have any opinion about POTUS based on personal knowledge?
I don't have any personal knowledge of the president, but we all have eyes and ears. And I think it's very dangerous when you have a president that attacks the press and calls any paper that disagrees with them or any stories fake news, or who attacks the judiciary. It's very dangerous when you have a president who doesn't respect the checks and balances of the three parts of government. But you know what? You mentioned, Michael, about you talked about basically the American Psychiatric Association's adoption of the Goldwater rule. And remember when Barry Goldwater was running for president, and I believe that some mental health experts opined that he was dangerous for the country or some such conclusion, and he sued these people, and he won. So the Psychiatric Association adopted what is known as the Goldwater rule, which is that you shouldn't say anything unless you actually have talked to the person. But I read the article about a psychiatrist at Yale. She's from Korea. And she said, yes, we have the Hippocratic Oath, but we also have the duty to warn. And so she started an organization, I believe it's called Duty to Warn. And people are signing up. So I think that more and more people are awakening to the unpredictability of this president and the dangers that his behavior poses. Now, there's another article that can be used, but that requires, the people in his own cabinet, such as the vice president, to question his mental state. And I have a feeling that's not going to particularly happen either. So one of the major things, as far as I can see from a totally practical standpoint, is if the Senate doesn't retain its 60-vote rule on legislation, we are really screwed. Okay? And that is what Mitch McConnell wants to do. He wants to have 60 Republicans so that they can pretty much become the House. And they'll have enough votes to pass anything they want. The only thing that's stopping him from doing some of the things that the House has passed is that we have a 60-vote requirement for much of the legislation that passes through us, unless they use some other tactics that like reconciliation, which we don't need to get into here, but it's a way to enact something with only 51 votes. But you know that Mitch McConnell Although President Trump is taking the credit for Neil Gorsuch becoming the Supreme Court Justice. No, it is Mitch McConnell who changed the rule. That's who did it. But even he has said, in the face of President saying, get rid of the 60-vote rule for legislation, let's have a government shutdown in September. Mitch McConnell said that we are not going to change that 60-vote rule. So sanity is kind of prevailing there, thank goodness. But we have to do everything we can to make sure that he doesn't get the 60 votes so that we have a checks and balance in the Senate, because that's going to make a huge difference in all our lives going forward with this presidency.
Hello. As a community programmer, an issue that I address on a regular basis is the challenge of the indigenous people of Hawaii. Many people very angry at the displacement, and what we're seeing is from the apology bill and forward that there's a lot to be seen, that the Hawaiian people are not being treated accurately or fairly, and we're especially seeing that in the contested case hearings with the 30-meter telescope. Now, that's a state issue, but I wonder if you can speak to the sovereignty movement, to the people of Hawaii. There is a very significant minority of people who are passionate and empowered and intelligent with their olelo. They are teachers, they are lawyers, and they make a very, very strong argument that Hawaii is continuing to not treat them fairly. And I know that that's a question that would be burning on the listeners' minds.
I have been a very strong supporter and proponent of Native Hawaiian programs. There are over 150 federal laws that are all vulnerable to attack because the Native Hawaiians are the only indigenous peoples that do not have a government-to-government relationship with the U.S. government. Therefore, there are lots of people in the U.S. House and also in the U.S. Senate who will vote against anything that has the words Native Hawaiian in it. Okay. So that includes Native Hawaiian housing, Native Hawaiian healthcare, Native Hawaiian education. And so we have to fight that every step of the way. And as you all know, the Interior Department promulgated rules that will enable Native Hawaiians, once the Native Hawaiians themselves come together and determine what kind of governance entity they want, will, if they want to, be able to negotiate with the U.S. government for the kind of a sovereign-to-sovereign relationship that the American Indians and Alaska Natives have. And so it is very much incumbent upon the Native Hawaiians to proceed down that path. It is not the federal government telling the Native Hawaiians what to do.
You understand that that is absolutely what they don't want, right? It's a fierce desire to not have that. So we've seen that in the Department of Interior meetings. It's a fierce desire to not have that solution.
Are you talking about this administration? Because it is the Obama administration that created the rules that will enable the Native Hawaiian community to negotiate.
The Native Hawaiian community that I'm hearing from does not want that government to government. They don't want to be a tribe. They don't want to be looked at as an indigenous people. So I'm not going to argue that, but that's not what they're asking for. So what you're suggesting is adverse to what a significant amount of people are asking for. I wish there was some in the room here to be able to really speak to it. So I'm just going to let it rest at that. But it's a very powerful issue that I hear as a programmer every week. So thank you.
I think basically what I am asking for is for the Native Hawaiian community to come together and decide what it is that they want, and whether they want the kind of relationship that the Alaska Natives and American Indians have, or what is it that they want, because it's really it is up to the Native Hawaiians to make that determination, and I think that is the appropriate place where that discussion and decision should occur. And if they don't want to have a relationship with the federal government, they don't need to have one. Nobody forces any of that to happen.
Aloha.
Aloha.
My name is Donna Osler, and I'm from the Waialua Homesteads. And I'm addressing a kind of a big picture of perhaps what some may call paranoia. history tends to repeat itself, and we have a lunatic alpha male running our country, and you actually already addressed the inappropriateness of the Republicans having supported the repeal of Obamacare and instituting a draconian effort now, and how they can kind of dance with this action and be inhumane. My concern is that the Reichstag is in operation, and they're not worried about an election because there won't be an election in 2018. And is there any way that is it possible that there can be some anticipatory guidance on a broad scale with the media to prepare people psychologically and not fall into hysteria? And is there any kind of grumbling amongst your colleagues about this potential? And I apologize if this is just kind of overwhelming.
Let me make sure I understand what potential are you concerned about? Because there will be elections in 2018.
Yeah, my concern is that there will be a artificially, internally created catastrophe, and all of us have imagination around that, and that given the catastrophic nature of this, authoritarianism will be in full anchor.
It requires, in my view, a populace, an awakened populace, and an energized, engaged populace that can figure out what's real and what's not real. So for a lot of this information, if you're going to look at Breitbart or you're going to look at some of these sources for your news, you get that slant. But if you're reading, say, some other places where you can get some news that can be deemed accurate, then that's where you go. But I think the Trump campaign really exposed some major fault lines in our country. Fault lines being we have not dealt well with racism in our country. We certainly have not addressed immigration in our country. There is a growing number of hate crimes occurring in our country, bullying in our country, intolerance of minorities in our country. So that is all happening. And so part of what our response is that we want to see hate crimes prosecuted. We want to see documentation. We want to see curriculum in our schools where we can address the learning of racism, because racism and prejudice is learned. And so to pay attention to those aspects of how people come to whatever their views are, because so much of it is felt, it's not here. So, there are just so many ways that we can all work in some way to make a difference. But if we don't stay engaged, then we're going to go down a path where our country, I'm afraid, will continue to be divided, and we will not heal the deep schisms that this very negative campaign wrought. So I am pushing for humane immigration reform. I continue to press for a humane way to address the issue of 11 million undocumented people. We need to protect the dreamers from deportation. We need to make sure that ICE is not going after undocumented people in our churches, in our schools, in our courthouses, in places where they need to be. These are not, so there's a bill that would prevent them from going to those places. So there are some very specific things that we can do. But it's not going to, there's no easy answer to the hatred that's come to the fore in our country.
But I wasn't really talking about racism or those kinds of schisms. I'm concerned that there's just a real totalitarian undercurrent that has the nuclear codes and the wherewithal. It seems that if enough of Americans are educated about the potential of this kind of event, that we will hold our center.
Yes, and that has to manifest in who gets elected to support these kinds of efforts. And I think that it is really important that people like General Mattis is there, because the last thing General Mattis wants to do is to go fight a war that we don't need to fight. So those are the kind of people that President Trump has to listen to, but he doesn't have too many of those folks surrounding him. So an educated, aware, awake populace is important. And I don't know, do you guys know Barbara Lee, who's one of the wonderful members of Congress? She says, I work with her very closely, and she used the phrase, she says, we got to stay woke. Okay? We got to stay woke. So I'm adopting that.
So Senator Kenneth from Waimea just wants to ask about Alzheimer's, Medicaid, and Medicare.
We need to continue support for research into Alzheimer's. That means that we have to provide resources to entities such as the National Institute of Health. And of course, we have to fight every step of the way any efforts by Tom Price and the Republicans, basically, to voucherize Medicare and to privatize Social Security and to cut Medicaid in ways that hundreds of thousands of people, millions all across the country, will be hurt. So that's what we have to do. That's what I'm going to do.
My question is regarding the Democratic Party as a whole. The past election and the campaign divided the Democratic Party. And you have spoken to the fact that Republicans are unified and that they have the big bucks backing them. And so that means that the party of the people, the Democrats, is at a disadvantage. Unless the Democrats are able to come together, even though there are opposing views as to the what direction the party should take. So my question is, in terms of the leadership of the factions within the Democratic Party, have you had, since the election, have you had any conferences between yourselves? Because obviously there was a lot of new energy and different ideas that came in from the younger generation. And even the members of the, I don't know the word, established Democratic Party were very surprised with the swelling that came from the young people in the country. So this, in those terms, it was a very different kind of election. And so it seems to me that, well, I went to Tulsi Gabbard's town hall, and it was, so the group there was, very, very supportive. And then I come to your town hall, and you have a group that's very supportive. And I wonder if you and other representatives from the national, government, senators, legislators, if you have gotten together and you have tried to strategize and bring the camps together so that we can be unified and more effective in addressing the unified front that the Republicans are posing. And that should be, at least for Hawaii, that we could, because we are basically a democratic state and have been for many years, and we're smaller, and we have culturally this idea of ohana, we brought aloha to the national government. I was wondering if you have had conversations with Tulsi Gabbard, and if you figured out an event or events where both sides can come together and come up with a unified approach to the Republicans.
Sure. If I gave the impression that the Republicans are united, all you have to do is look at the health care bill that passed by one Republican extra vote. So they are not united. You have the Senate Republicans who are not jumping on board, so they are not united as such. Our party is, if you have the impression that we're all over the place, that's only because we care about so many things, and it would be. I don't see schisms in our party in the way that I think you may be referring to it, at least at the national level. Yes, we have retreats. Yes, we talk with between the House and the Senate. And so coming up with a strong civil rights, economic message, as far as I'm concerned, equal opportunities, those are the kinds of things that people care about, because I think we care about our future. We want to make sure that our kupuna get taken care of and that our children have educational opportunities. And we want to make sure that our middle class flourishes and that we're not supporting just the richest people in our country. That is basically what the Democrats stand for. And even if we have differences, we have a big tent. I have really good friends who are not choice people, by the way. But I'm going to do everything I can to help them also, because we're not, I don't want to apply an ideological litmus test to good people who want to be on the page. So many other issues, so that's, I think we are united. And as for the young people, I'm really glad, because a lot of us got our start in politics when we were young, and I was only in my 20s when I organized. I tried to take over the Democratic Party of the state of Hawaii for George McGovern, who was a peace candidate. And we had thousands of people showing up. So I was very busy protesting the Vietnam War and marching, and then a group of us found each other and said, this is fine and good, and we can sing We Shall Overcome, which is still one of my favorite hymns, but we need to do more. We need to have seats at the table. A lot of us decided to go back to school. And many of us ran for office, and that's what's happening with some of the young people. But you gotta stay the course. So the 3 life lessons that I've learned through my time in service, as well as my immigrant background, is one person can make a difference, because my mother totally changed my life by bringing me to this country to give me opportunities for a better life that I never would have had in Japan. With an abusive father. So the second life lesson is half the battle is showing up. So all the young people, half the battle for them is to stay the course, because I started in my 20s as a college student, and I have been staying the course and showing up, and that's what it's going to take. That's life lesson number 2. And the third is we have to take risks. We got to get out of our comfort zones. So, it may not be all that comfortable for you to go, and thank you for asking a question, because it's not that easy to stand up and ask a question even. So get out of our comfort zones, because we have to take risks now more than ever. That means reaching out to groups and people and really respecting other people's perspectives. That's what I do. I am the only Buddhist ever elected to the United States Senate. That means that I come from... I hope. And I'm not a daily practicing Buddhist in that I don't, do my mantras and all that, but it's how I live. And I try to live with compassion and respect for other people's viewpoints. And equal justice and opportunities, those are not just words to me. Those are things that I fight for, because that was my own life too, and I see it all around me. So I think we're at the end. If there are any people who would like to continue to... One more question. Okay, are you here? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, John Zwiebel again, and I wanted to empathize with the sense of betrayal you must have felt after the Democratic Party abandoned McGovern in 72. It still hurts. And
I kept showing up, though.
Yes.
Gotta keep showing up.
And that's why I'm here right now. The question about the lawsuit that's being brought against the DNC had nothing to do with the Electoral College, although I can understand why you would want to go that direction. I think it would require a constitutional amendment to get rid of the Electoral College. The question really is about the superdelegates that make up the DNC and whether or not that is a fair way of being able to determine who our candidate is. The presidential preference poll in Hawaii went overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders, yet I won't go any further.
Well, we are a precinct state, and the people of Hawaii overwhelmingly voted for the precinct method is not exactly the most democratic way to pick the candidate either. So I love Bernie. I work with him. He chaired the Veterans Committee when I was on that committee, and I will tell you, he knows that I'm a progressive because Bernie showed me that a lot of people think that he's just sort of this totally down the road, but in chairing that committee, he had to compromise. And when we went to conference, I was the least senior person on the Veterans Committee. He called me and he said, "Do you want to be on the conference committee?" I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, if you're going to be on the conference committee, it has to be a conference of the whole, which means all the Republicans are going to be on that committee, on that conference committee to deal with the comprehensive veterans bill that we came up with under Bernie's leadership. And there was a pause because I think Bernie also hesitates to ask, "Are you with me?" Right? So I said, "You know what, Bernie? There's only one more person on that committee who is almost as lefty as you are, and that is me. You are talking to her. You can count on me." And he said, "Okay, we're going to have a committee of the whole." So you know what? I tell you, Bernie articulated a lot of things that a lot of us have been fighting for gazillions of years, but he brought a lot of people to the table to be engaged. Many of them are going to run for office. That's great, because that's what we need to do. But frankly, you know what? In terms of the reform of how we select our president, I do think that in my view, and you obviously maybe disagree, is I think changing the Electoral College and eliminating it and to have basically a vote by the people of our country, that is a much more democratic way of proceeding, and that's kind of where I am.
So you're saying you're going to get rid of the superdelegate system inside the Democratic Party?
That's more, that's... I am a superdelegate.
I'm sorry,
and
you can't have it both ways.
You
can't say you're going to get rid of the Electoral College and then say you're not going to get rid of the superdelegate system.
Okay. Well, you certainly have a different viewpoint than I do in terms of the priorities of where I want to place my resources. So go to it. Really. I'm not saying that facetiously. Because believe me, I experienced being shut down and all that, and half the battle is just staying the course. And I feel like this is what I'm doing, and I'm hearing from more and more people who are wanting to be engaged and to do everything they can to change the system in whatever way they see fit and to garner the support of others who feel the way you do. Because that's what it takes. So may I decide to run for office so I could do more of it. And that's what I see happening. That's what I encourage. That's what keeps me going. Mahalo, everybody.